Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for the third and final faculty talk of Queer Week. Like I said before on Monday, this is one of our favorite features of the summer workshop program, so we're so pleased that you've joined us tonight. For those of you who are new, perhaps haven't been here this week, my name is Dustin Ross. I'm the summer program manager here at the Fine Arts Work Center. My pronouns are, thank you, Sharon. My pronouns are he, him. And tonight, we're very excited. We are going to be hearing from writer Carmen Maria Machado, who will read from their work, and artist Ilana Savdie, who will be giving a presentation. Following that, we will invite them to the stage for a Q&A. So before we begin, there's a bit of housekeeping and a few other items of interest. I know you've heard it all week, but tomorrow night is student night. We are very, very excited. Like it will be the highlight of the week. The sign-up sheet is across the way in the student lounge. We have a lot of people who are signed up, so if you haven't, please go ahead and we encourage you to do so. It's a really, really special night. I'd also like to remind you to consider supporting our honor tax by making a donation to the Native Land Conservancy. That QR code and the URL is in the back of the room on our checkout desk. After tonight's presentation and discussion, Carmen will be signing books in the back after the faculty talks. Books by other members of this week's faculty, as you know, are all for sale back there on our merchandise table. And speaking of merchandise, as you know as well, we have a lot of fabulous new merchandise, including something that you probably haven't seen yet. We have brand new tote bags that just came in. So, in addition to our t-shirts, in addition to our stickers, all of the books that we have from our faculty that it can be yours to take home, we also have tote bags for you to carry it all in. So, the gallery, the Hudson D. Walker Gallery will be open after the event. Right now, we're showing our summer exhibition, To Move a Mountain, curated by past Falk Fellow Cody Brown and featuring work by other Falk Fellows. The proceeds of all work goes to support Falk programs, so please be sure and check that out after the event if you haven't already. We'd like to give a shout out to the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod Phi Foundation, who support our summer public programming. Restrooms are located right down the hallway, and so is a water fountain and a refillable water station. Finally, please do us all a favor and silence your cell phones if you haven't already. And that's about it. Now, I would like to invite one of Carmen's students, Keenan McWilliam, to the stage, who will introduce Carmen Maria Machado.
Hi, my name is Keenan. I'm a filmmaker and writer, and this is actually my first week at the Fine Arts Work Center. I really love it, and I'm honored to be introducing Carmen Maria Machado to you all today. Carmen is the author of the graphic novel, The Low, Low Woods, the award-winning short story collection, Her Body and Other Parties, and one of my absolute favorite books, her best-selling memoir, In the Dream House. She's a National Book Award finalist, a recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Bard Fiction Prize, and in 2018, the New York Times listed Her Body and Other Parties as a member of the New Vanguard, one of 15 remarkable books by women that are shaping the way we read and write fiction in the 21st century. Being in Carmen's class has been really fucking fun and twisted. She's created a space where levity and mischief are used to bust open dark topics and doors, leading us to rooms we didn't know existed. I keep coming back to one particular thing Carmen said, that one of the purposes of writing is to make someone turn their head. The first time I read In the Dream House, I felt like my head did a full 360. I could not put it down, and I could not stop telling people about it. This included my therapist, and she had questions. Carmen's words have a way of cracking the reader down the middle. Through her elaborate and fragmented approach to form, a visceral narrative emerges. I saw how language could be elastic, bending to create space, and through these openings, I saw possibility. I am unbelievably excited for Carmen's reading tonight and to see what rooms we may end up in together. Please join me in welcoming Carmen Maria Machado.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello, thank you. So I have a pen up here because I am reading from something that is unpublished and unfinished, which is very unusual for me, so you're welcome. I usually like to do like a very polished story presentation, but I did not have anything of sufficient length that I could get it all in the little 20-minute window of my reading, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna pull some like sections from this novel that I'm working on. So I'm currently finishing up a book that I sold a million years ago called A Brief and Fearful Star. It's a short story collection, a linked short story collection. But then after that, I'm going to be working on a novel that I'm calling Holy Shiver. And I'm calling it, like in my head, Horny Queers at the End of the World, because that's kind of what it is about. There's a series of characters. There's Raina, who you're going to hear from, and AJ, who's another one, who they date each other and also other people. And so you're sort of getting like little snippets of their lives. So I'm just going to go through 4 sections, and I'll sort of contextualize each one as best I can. But also some of these I don't know where they actually belong. So, you know, we'll see. And this is in case I find a typo or a thing I need to change. Okay. When Raina conceptualized her desire, saw it in her mind's eye, which when sufficiently roused, spilled into her other eyes. It was a field trip she'd taken with her class when she was in middle school, a visit to a local network of caves around which a local tourist attraction had been constructed. Much of it was generic: stalactites and stalagmites, chilly railings, stone stairs worn down by legions of minors and later middle schoolers. But at the center of the attraction was something the guide called Circle's End, which didn't mean much to Raina until she got there and realized it was a hole. But not just a hole, a cavern of significant depth. Did they want to see? The guide called on Raina before she realized she was raising her hand and gave her a stone procured from a small pile of them. The stone was an odd object, almost artificially smooth on one side and jagged on the other, as if it had been broken off of something larger. A milky vein swirled through it. Oh my God, I'm finding all these typos. A milky vein swirled through it. Raina took it to the railing at the edge of the hole and was seized with a feeling she would feel for the rest of her life when at the edge of a great height, even when that height was controlled, like in a building, or virtual, like a video game where she'd played a mage clinging to the side of a mountain, a strange tingling in the back of her calves, some ancient instinct keeping her away from the edge. She cradled the stone for a long moment, willing it warmer. After long minutes, she realized her classmates were watching her. She stretched her arm out over the hole, and after a beat, here her calves clenched, the ancient instinct taking control, released the stone into the air. Years later, when Rachel was deep inside of her, moving their fist braced against the edges of her pelvis, she wondered how so much eroticism cycled around holes that could be stuffed, overflowed, filled to the brim, too much. She talked with lovers about how their cocks could barely fit, their hands could barely fit, their cum would certainly overflow. There was too much. It was too wide, too long, too big, too overwhelming. How could she describe then the shiver that traveled through her body when she thought about that stone falling through that impossible cavern? How the heat of her hand dissolved into the air and the stone took on an implacable chill, the same temperature as the air around it, changing even as it fell because the falling went on for so long. You could take so many languorous cycles of breath before that stone hit the bottom. You could say a complete thought. You could explain yourself. You could even change your mind. It was always a mistake, telling the people who loved her that she wanted to be nothing. They always had the same reaction. How could I treat you like you're nothing? I love you. You can't be an object when you're a person. She wanted to shake them violently. If you loved me, you would reduce me to ash when I asked you to. You would drop me in a hole to nowhere. That's the first section. Oh. So Rachel, who's mentioned in here, is sort of an on-again, off-again lover of Raina's. And this next section starts after that. Raina knows what she has to do. I don't know after what. I don't know the incident, the inciting incident of this section. I simply know what happens, if that makes any sense. Writing is so weird. After that, Raina knew what she had to do. She went home and took a shower so cold her brain stopped humming for half an hour. She stood over her counter and ate chunks of cucumber dipped in cream cheese while scrolling through her and Rachel's texts. She went back nearly a year before she stopped. The last text she saw was Rachel describing, almost idly, the dream they'd had about fucking Raina on a lake, not in it, not under the water, but on top. This was before they'd switched to almost primarily audio messages. Raina ran backwards towards the present, recording after recording, half of them Rachel commanding Raina to come and Raina doing it, half of them Rachel telling Raina about the butch elders who raised her from a pup, Raina talking about not coming out until halfway through her 20s. Okay, her late 20s. But it didn't matter. Raina had something to say, and hadn't Rachel said to say what was on her mind? Raina dragged the mic. Oh, this also, you guys know how WhatsApp works, right? She's in WhatsApp. Raina dragged the microphone icon up and released it, letting the haptic feedback slow her breathing. She let the timer run for a few seconds and then began her message. She explained to Rachel about the day's therapy. Oh, I guess it was therapy. Oh, that's what was happening. I don't know. Something happened in therapy, I guess, I don't know. She explained to Rachel about the day's therapy session, explained that her therapist had listened to her talk her way into a cul-de-sac in which she acknowledged that maybe the fact that she wanted her dad to understand and be impressed by and love her in a more concrete and obvious way could be maybe the reason she wanted masculine of-center people to lightly choke her into euphoria or strike her with moderate force across the face and or breasts. And when her therapist said, possibly, she got furious at him. So furious she threw a tissue box, which he'd calmly dodged, like he'd known it was coming, like he was her father, dodging his fatherly responsibilities with such skill that it affected her sexually, which was, she said to Rachel on the message, demented. Demented not because of taboo, but because it was so obvious and so boring and so fucking annoying. Like if you tried to put it in a novel, your workshop would crucify you. The trouble was, the act of throwing the tissue box was exactly the sort of thing that Raina was trying to avoid, an act of profound earnestness. It was a surprisingly real reaction, full of fury and uncut feeling. And that, Raina said now, 13 minutes into her message, was unforgivable. Because Raina was a millennial. She'd been steeped in irony since childhood, the fact that she was well into her 30s, but this was all supposed to have hardened into a solid and durable shellac. But here she was, feeling things, stupid, childish things. People always talked about her generation like they were eternal children, but everyone she knew was bent with grief and hopelessness, the kind of despair that one would assume only appeared close enough to death to be afraid, but before the inevitable resignation. And that, now 21 minutes in, was what made this all so stupid. Rachel was a solid Gen Xer. If anything, she was supposed to be more steeped in irony, more disaffected, masters of distance and remove. But Rachel wasn't. She was a fucking romantic, a goddamn gentleman, a sadist with a heart of gold. The fact is, 24 minutes, Raina didn't want Rachel just to hold her down, spit in her mouth, spit on her own hand and force it into Raina's mouth, fuck her from behind, get her dick sucked in the car in the parking lot of the strip mall near her house, slap her tits and cunt and ass and face, pull her hair, rip her tights, fist her at a hotel in Montreal, fuck her on, not in a lake. Raina wanted to be precious to her. I want to be precious to you. These were her exact words, spoken at 28:39 and with more need and precision than she'd ever allowed anyone. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Raina didn't want to be precious to anyone, and certainly not to somebody who was patient and kind and gentle and a daddy with a capital D, because you cannot allow yourself to be rejected by two dads. Such a thing would totally immobilize you. What did they give you for that? Double therapy? Exponential CBT? Extra strength analysis? Or do they promise you some kind of high-tech professional brain fixing like eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, and then take you out back and hand you a melting popsicle and dispatch you with a shotgun while you're distracted, because no one should have to live that way. As Raina rounded the 32-minute mark, she explained to Rachel that she couldn't take it, she couldn't handle the waiting and not knowing, the ambiguity and the ambivalence, the recursive quality of their relationship, which of course wasn't even really a proper relationship. And even though Rachel had clearly outlined the boundaries from the beginning and behaved beautifully within them, so beautifully it was like watching a dance and knowing you could never, ever begin to repeat it. Around 35 minutes, Rhena began to soften what she was saying, even though she didn't know exactly what she was saying. She said to Rachel that she cared for her. She wanted their relationship to change but not end. She just didn't know where she was going. Such a thing was liable to drive her crazy. It had nothing to do with Rachel, not exactly. More like Rhena had needs. She didn't know what those needs were exactly, but the idea of having to express them to someone explicitly was, well, it was terrible. I'm a bottom, Rachel said. You tell me what I need. But that was stupid, idiotic on its face. She could imagine Rachel, she said to Rachel in the message, Rachel's reaction to this idea. Baby, that isn't what bottoming means. At 40 minutes, Rhena acknowledged this did not make any sense, that she could tell she was wrecking something lovely on the rocks of her own insecurities, that she was sorry, she was so sorry. At minute 41, she cried. At minute 42, she apologized again. At minute 43, she said, I don't want to be friends. I can't be friends. You have seen my asshole. Please understand, I'm sorry. She stopped recording. In the chat sat the fat, undulating worm of her conversation. Rhena had a bad habit of recording herself talking and then re-listening to it before sending. She liked to pretend it was quality control, but if she was being honest with herself, it was something closer to narcissism. But this one was far too long, and the things she said far too ridiculous, and the idea of hearing them read back to her in her own voice was completely unbearable, so she tapped the little paper airplane icon and sent the message away. Just as the file popped into the chat, she saw, in horror, that Rachel's status had changed. She was recording a message of her own. Correct. The timing meant she couldn't possibly have heard anything that Rhena had just said. She'd probably just had a thought and wanted to share. That was a sort of kind and hot and gentlemanly shit that Rachel did. It was enraging. The message, 43 seconds long, sat unlistened to in Rhena's inbox for 2 days. She could not bear to play it. It was the last thing Rachel would ever send her. On the second day, Rhena woke up from a dream. In the dream, she was on top of the lake in a dress, the hem hitched up past her waist. In the dream, she could feel Rachel's eyes on her from the shore. She knew she could drift over there if she wanted to, could have not everything she wanted, but close enough if she just looked at Rachel's face. But instead, she turned away into the morning, heard the garbage truck rattling a couple of doors down, the clatter of trash and cans, and a faint beeping. Behind it, a squirrel, fear chattering in the tree. She made coffee, then picked up her phone and played the message with her forehead on the table. Rachel said, hello. Rhena heard the soft, fat click of a car door opening, then closing again. Rachel said she was thinking about Rhena because just now she was driving around and remembering something she loved so much. Sometimes, she said, when you come, you laugh. And that's the end of that section. I'm actually going to switch these around. Okay, so it used to be this next section was the first chapter, and now I don't know where it's supposed to go, but I will read it. So AJ is the other character who is one of the POV characters in the novel, and AJ is a non-binary, like a younger than Rhena, and non-binary, and sort of finding their whole thing in the world, but they have crossed paths. They had almost escaped winter when AJ asked Rhena to spit in their mouth. Rhena did it. She always said yes. It was the thing AJ loved the most about her, but AJ hated it. Not the idea of the spitting, obviously, but the way Rhena did it. No matter what AJ said or did, or how many times they demonstrated, into the sink, into the street, into Rhena's mouth, it was never hard with the force and demand of ejaculate, but a long, slow drip, the loogie of a bully. 2 weeks in, AJ had to ask, have you ever done this before? Then, to clarify, spit into someone's mouth. They were in AJ's car in the parking lot of a Wendy's. Sure, Rachel said, so casually that AJ didn't believe her. She finished her Dr. Pepper and sucked too long at the ice. Are you sure, AJ said? You don't have to be embarrassed. They were always secretly worrying that they'd asked for something worth being embarrassed about. Rhena popped the lid without looking at it, a low, rubbery squeak, and she started to chew on the ice. AJ, you asked me if I'd ever spit into someone's mouth before, and the answer is yes. Why would I lie about something like that? I think the reason I like it, AJ said, hoping this would clarify without shaming, not that Rhena seemed to have experienced anything even remotely approaching shame, even once in her life, is the way it's like someone coming on you, or like in you, hard and fast, sudden. Raina laughed and laughed. Oh, she said. Oh, fuck, sorry. You meant like as an adult? Like sexually? No, Jaybird, you're my first. And that was how AJ discovered they were fucking a mean girl. A reformed mean girl, one could only hope. But also a very specific type, the type who understood that worse than a spit released is spit held, a glistening oyster of saliva dangling above someone's mouth. Some younger, dumber version of AJ, too online, too sentimental for their own fucking good, would have found this unforgivable, or at the very least, a boner killer. But then AJ had, in the parlance, touched grass, fucked the grass, been fucked by the grass. The more they thought about it, the hotter it was. Wasn't it kind of gay, that sort of bully? The weird thing about being queer was you could say anything was homoerotic because it all basically was. After that, AJ couldn't stop thinking about it. Raina straddling them in the dirt of some backwater playground. Raina staring them down so hard they stepped out of a circle of classmates. Raina yanking on their hair, pummeling them into a brick wall. It felt crazy to think these thoughts in a growing puddle of their own wetness. AJ had been tormented by so many of these girls as a kid. They were awful. They were other. They felt as alien as anything they could have tumbled from space. But that was what made Raina so hot, wasn't it? Fucking her felt like AJ was bridging some unspeakable erotic chasm, something taboo and celestial. They liked each other, but they didn't understand each other. And if, in AJ's own past, AJ had seen a photo of them together, they would have scoffed. They would not have believed that it was real. The last time AJ saw Raina, they couldn't take their eyes off Raina's boots, which went up past her knees and created a visual plane of where her thighs met the hem of her skirt. She sat down and put one foot on AJ's collarbone. They unzipped the boots, one after the other, breathed in, not heavily, not obviously, the funk of her stockinged feet. After they were off, Raina placed her hand on AJ's. She had on so many rings, big ones and little ones, a fat one on her thumb, a few that sat high on her fingers like collars, a place AJ didn't even realize rings could go. Raina ran the back of her hand on AJ's face, let the stone and settings and bands overload every sensory receptor in their brain. Take them off, Raina said. AJ took her hand, turned it palm side up, then inverted it. They tugged at the ring finger, then the middle. Without your hands, Raina said. AJ took Raina's finger in their mouth, tonguing the rings experimentally before locking their own teeth behind one and sliding it off. They released the ring into Raina's other hand. They did this over and over and over. The settings flooded with AJ's saliva. The last ring, AJ got excited, pulled too hard, swallowed it. A tiny thing, a stacking ring, Raina said, truly nothing to worry about. But it was gone. Pobrecite, Raina said. She took their throat in her hand, spoke the next sentence so close to their ear, every fine blonde hair on their skin went erect. No better than a puppy. When she was ready to leave, Raina put back on all her rings, except obviously the one. You owe me, she said. The what she was owed, a new ring, money, the length of AJ's throat, she did not say. She zipped her boots long and slow. She took AJ's face in her hands and peppered their jaw with her manicure. See you soon, she said, and it was equal parts promise and threat, exactly the way that AJ loved. AJ could hear her footsteps all the way down the hall. She always walked like she was coming to, or departing from committing a murder in which she had no concern about getting caught, and listened to the ding of the elevator. When AJ looked in the bathroom mirror, there was a blob of spit in their hair. Their hair was too long. They had an appointment to cut it tomorrow. It was fine. They rinsed it out with a hot washcloth, crawled into a bed that smelled like pussy and sweat, and fucked themselves to a third orgasm before falling asleep. The next morning, their boss called. The office was closed, at least for now. AJ made a leisurely breakfast, listened to their news podcast while doing the dishes. For the first time in weeks, the sickness that had been slowly inching its way up the broadcast moved to the front. AJ stopped fisting the mug in the sink. Their hand jumped to their hair, where that spit had hung the night before. Then they thought about Raina, that idiotic lingerie, all those fucking straps that AJ just wanted to take in their teeth, the way their whole body contracted with pleasure when they heard the long, slow gathering of wetness in Raina's throat. They texted Raina, who sent AJ something about bottoming that AJ did not get. She was feeling fine, she said. Guess we have to cancel our date, AJ wrote. Pobrecite, Raina said. See when things are less crazy, I guess. AJ's phone rang. The hair appointment was canceled. It would have to be rescheduled when things calmed down. 2 weeks later, Raina stopped responding to her text messages. AJ sent half a dozen into the void, a joke about quarantine, a request for a recipe, a semi-serious question about the amount of danger they were all in, a horny memory, a horny observation, a horny photo, and then stopped. She was busy, obviously. Well, not busy, depressed maybe. It was hard to imagine Reyna as depressed per se, but she didn't seem capable of falling into a hole and deciding to stay there for a while. Then, one day, AJ was putting together their only jigsaw puzzle for the 4th time, a kitten picnic with an interloping dog. A ding, a message. This is Reyna's mom. I'm sorry, but Reyna is passed. AJ read it a few times without understanding. Then they perceived the homophone. Reyna is passed. Past what, they thought. Finally, they felt their brain take up the language in one horrifying slurp. It descended through their body like rain, topsoil to bedrock. They set the piece down in their hand, opposing tab, opposing sockets, and opened up their text. They typed, haha, in instinct. Then deleting it, wrote instead, what happened? But that didn't feel right either, like they were invading her privacy. Then they had a series of thoughts they did not fully understand. I could have gotten used to the spitting thing. Then, how many of our texts did her mom read? Then, I wonder if she made that salmon bake. Then, her ring, it was sitting in a shallow dish of rubbing alcohol in the bathroom. Then, I never said. Then, said what? And their brain could not answer. AJ will live into their 80s. They will see so many things in their lifetime, some of which at the moment of Reyna's death they could have predicted, but many which they could not. But for the rest of their days, every time someone spit into their cunt or face, and it is many, many times, world without end, amen, it is like meeting Reyna's ghost. Every time their body jolts with like electricity has run through them. Every time they feel like their skin is saying the same thing. Hello, I missed you. And every time they knew it to be true. And this is the last one. It's much shorter. And this is from some point after that chapter that I just read. And it also starts with like a transition, and I don't know what from. So anyway, this is why, out of everything, AJ preferred audio of people coming. Conversation was fine. Fuck, conversation was great. But there was nothing like the blooming chime of the chat app delivering these tiny gifts. First, a number. 039, 141, 402, 1226, 3451, exclamation point. Then the sound itself, moans crashing against crisp, clean archipelagos of language. Oh yes, fuck, God, yes, fuck. The sound of it filling the apartment. Before, AJ used to slip in headphones to receive them. It was always a little treat to listen to them in public, sitting on the trolley or walking through a park or a busy mall. The gentle crush of bodies and humanity and dogs and wildlife and the sun and the trees with an urgent bass behind it, the unmistakable sound of someone breaking through to the other side. Now, who cares? AJ listens, masturbates, records their own devastation, sends it back. Back when AJ was actually fucking people's bodies with their body, the neighbor on AJ's eastern wall would knock on the door, or would knock when it got too loud, too late. Bad news for everyone. Reyna was constantly coming over after 11, and Sam had insomnia and always wanted to be fucked back to sleep, and Aparna was a medical student and kept odd hours. And Reyna loved a performance, and Sam wasn't a great judge of their own volume, and Aparna was just unrepentantly loud. But now, with someone coming loudly every hour, the wall was silent. Maybe the neighbor was dead or had fled the city, or maybe they were listening too. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carmen, for that wonderful reading, and thank you, Keenan, for that introduction. Next, we would like to invite Christian Clifford to the stage, who is going to be introducing Ilana Savdie.
Hi, I'm C.D. Clifford. I was in Ilana's class last year and came back. I'm one of two people that came back to take the class again. The official bio. Ilana Savdie was raised in Barranquilla, Colombia, and Miami, Florida, and is currently based in Brooklyn, New York. She received her MFA from the Yale School of Art in 2018 and her BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design. Savdie is recognized for her surreal and electrifying beeswax, acrylic, and oil paintings, which invert traditional associations of figuration and composition. Her distinctive style employs the transformative power of performance as a vehicle to displace control, embrace the grotesque, and dismantle ideas of binary identity relating to migration, foreignness, and familiarity. In 2023, Savdie presented her first museum solo exhibition, Radical Contractions, at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Her work is included in the permanent collections of many prominent museums, including the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Jewish Museum in New York, and the Berger Collection in Hong Kong, and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, among others. She also has an amazing show called Glottal Stop. That is, it's called Glottal Stop. That's at White Cube on Madison Avenue in New York. And if you're in New York, please go see it. It's amazing. And she's also an amazing teacher. And I asked most of the people in our class for some words to describe her teaching. And people said that Ilana makes the monstrous acceptable and accessible, that she is innovation, that she is innovation, okay? That she is a generous teacher, engaged, authentic, that she gives us the confidence to experiment and get weird with it. Contemplative, generous, 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 generous. Involved, dedicated, loving, nurturing. Allude to the mad scientist creating monsters. Creates diverse schools of thought. She's an artist, whether her own or ours. She uses words like carving, excavating, building, insertion, suspended, embedded, discombobulate, reconstruct, folklore, binding, power dynamics, dismembered, wrinkle, gather, discard the precious thing, transcend. Her work is like a performance of transgression. She's externalizing the internal. Desire and release is all there. Folklore, camouflage. She talks about predator and prey. And one of the things she talked to us about is starting from failure as a really strong place to start. And that means a lot to me as like a queer survivor, middle-aged woman who often feels like a failure as a woman, that I was a failure as a girl, that I was a failure as a mother, a failure as a wife. And so her like refusal of wholeness means so much to me personally. And she asks us, who gets to be a body? Who gets to have a body that we care about? How do we perform our bodies? So please join me in welcoming the great Ilana Savdie.
Wow, okay. That was, I feel like I don't have to, you guys used my words that I was about to say today, so thank you so much for that, and to everybody in my class that, you don't know how much that means to me. So I'm gonna use some of those words now. I wanted to introduce this talk with a quote from Gloria Anzaldúa that I have up on my studio wall for the past few years. It's from her book Borderlands. Anzaldúa writes, "I want the freedom to carve and chisel my own face, to staunch the bleeding with ashes, to fashion my own gods out of my entrails." So that's sort of how you can enter this work with me. I grew up in Barranquilla, in Colombia, which is home to the second biggest carnival in the world. And so as a result, I've been sort of surrounded by these carnivals and the aesthetics from them and the sort of ethos of the carnival. And this has spilled over into my work. So this is a picture on the left of my elementary school gymnasium and all of us in it. That's me on the right, and it's not on Halloween. So just to paint a picture. So the carnival, major through lines in the work come from the fascination I have with the carnivalesque and specific ideas around that as a space of resistance. I'm interested in what carnivals open up through the sort of like release of impulses that threaten social order, or the kind of reversal of roles, exaggerating the body as a form of mockery, and mockery as a form of protest. I'm interested in how carnivals are spaces where power and parody meet, where critique and celebration are fluid and intertwined. All of these are themes that I associate with queer history and modes of queering. And so in my work, I'm thinking about the carnival as kind of fluid and perpetual. I'm not quite working from a specific carnival or anything kind of too literal in that way, but just thinking about kind of cultural fragmentation and dealing with amalgamation of existing parts and kind of forming something new from it. I'm fascinated by, I'm kind of moving this laptop and this at the same time, so bear with me. I'm fascinated by the idea of the trickster, and thinking about the trickster as an agent of change, and looking to both folklore and nature to varying degrees. So I'm thinking about trickery through color, costuming, and theatricality as a glamour for modes of resistance. The sort of ambiguous and amorphous as a way of resisting categorization. In nature, I'm looking to trickery as instinctive modes of survival and adaptation. So I'm interested in the idea of the camouflage as a survival tactic for prey, or as like a predatory method of entrapment. I'm particularly interested in the parasite, because that's sort of the kind of figure in nature that most embodies sort of insisting on impurity and imposition, bad boundaries, and it forces its host to change from within. So I kind of look to the parasite and work from both like in parasitic modes and also, in ways that make sense to me, but I'm thinking about what that means all the time, and work from imagery of the parasite often. I'm increasingly interested in the monstrous, as evident by this class that I'm teaching. I won't describe it too much in depth, but I'm very interested in the kind of refusal to be whole and the accumulation of pieces at odds with each other. I'm excited about spaces, that sort of space of possibility between attraction and repulsion. And I sit in that space of the sort of disgusting that comes from inducing a kind of desire without providing any kind of clear resolution. I feel that I arrive at the monstrous through abstraction and arrive at abstraction through the monstrous, so it's sort of a back and forth for me. So in the work that I'll be talking about today, I'm working with a treatment that I've developed of painting with melted wax on raw canvas. So I'm brushing onto the canvas thin, translucent layers of wax that are drying as they're being applied, and that kind of gathers into this sort of texture. It's like kind of congealing of the gesture, and it kind of sits for me in that space of the uncanny, just by being somewhat familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. And I'm really interested in the quick drying gesture, and so this sort of fossilizes the kind of liquidity, and that shows up in my work often. And just in general, interested in using the material the wrong way. So it's not meant to function like paint, and trying to use it like paint kind of arrives at something different and new. So I'll usually start from very rough sketches that are not pictured here, and then they'll lead to these works on paper that are pen and ink or ink and acrylic. And I usually get to about 50% of the drawing. These are finished, but I usually get to about halfway to this point before I move on to the sketch that will become the painting. And then I come back to the drawings later. I see them as their own sort of series, and kind of see them as the alphabet that leads to the language. So not quite a sketch for the painting, but it informs it, as do the rest of the imagery that I've sort of shown you up to now. And when I move on to the canvas, I'm usually starting on the floor. I'm starting with these pores. And that's a way of kind of rerouting from that original drawing. And this is an extremely difficult stage to control. And it's that sort of power play that I'm really interested in between myself and the material. And it's that struggle in painting that I'm always really interested in. So I think of that as a kind of trafficking in problems, and this is a detail of a painting that I think most, I mean, if you could see it as brightly as it is on my laptop. But it's moments of incidents colliding with moments of intention in painting. And this is a picture of the sort of living wall of references in my studio. This is a little bit old, and it has since evolved so much and moved onto the floor. But I tend to relate to the world through image. I'm not actually like holding a parasite in my hand. But it's, and often through found image. So it's this kind of visual research that guides the work. I'll gather images very instinctively and not quite with any particular intent. And by laying them all out, I'll start to make sense of patterns and understand what it is that I'm drawn to, and start to make sense of why, like kind of trusting that instinctively I'm building something. And that'll then lead to the rabbit holes of research that'll start to inform a new body of work. So, for example, I find that I'm often responding to images of things that are performing something else, or in perpetual states of becoming or shape-shifting, or just like behaving inappropriately, whatever that means. So I'm also really interested in the expanding a genre, thinking about genres and like expanding them until they sort of collide with each other, and what is revealed through that collision. Does one genre define another by what it is not? I like to think of one genre sabotaging another, so that interplay is showing up in the paintings often. In particular, I've been drawn to tensions between horror and comedy, which I think this is a good example of. So this is the complete piece on the right. It's about 10 feet tall. This is just a detail of it that I think sort of combines the kind of visceral and the absurd. So this shows up in different degrees of ambiguity. In a series that I began in 2020, I was very drawn to the theatricality of religious Baroque paintings, and thinking about the kind of abundance of disorienting detail that shows up in those, and the sort of theatricality of good and evil and dealing with that binary. And then looking at compositions that dealt with dissension and ascension, and then thinking of that in contrast to the banality and at times horror of being tethered. So for that, I was looking to Goya's drawings of war and the kind of matter-of-factness of that kind of life and death. And the relationship to each other kind of induced a sense of the uncanny that I'm really interested in. I think is a really generative place in this body of work for me. So I'm also looking to choreographies of bodies and looking at things as formally and clinically as I can, like almost blurring my eyes, and removing any impositions of good and evil. So this is an etching of Massacre of the Innocents from 1600, and then a picture of people climbing the wall, storming the Capitol on January 6th. I'm looking to these different images of people helping each other climb a wall, and then thinking about like imagining if those people were acrobats, if that wall was a curtain, just really trying to escape any kind of challenging the binary of good and evil, and just really trying to think about the idea of a reenactment and how that would sort of potentially undo any imposition of, like how that would kind of retell history and kind of alter it through that retelling. This is a piece called Queen Breeders. I was looking at Bruegel the Elder's Beekeepers, and I realized that the medieval beekeeper uniform was a really good example of that kind of banal and the sinister, so that's in the bottom, and these are a few contemporary images of people recreating those. I recreated one in my studio as well. The Queen Breeders is based on breeder queens and bees, which are bred only to produce daughter queens and retain a kind of purity of breed, which I thought was really horrifying. I'm still thinking about what it means for something amorphous to shapeshift, like memory over time, and so this is a detail of that Queen Breeders. And these are a few paintings that made up a show I had at Kohn Gallery in LA in 2021 titled Entrañadas. And then after this, I honed in on some aspects of comedy and failure as modes of radicality. I was thinking specifically of characters like the jester, the parasite, the witch, the clown, and thinking about the flop in comedy as new ways of finding success, and really leaning into failure in the paintings. This piece is called La Llorona por detrás. This piece is called Feast of Fools. These are from 2022. Feast of Fools is a Christian tradition from the 12th and 13th century, where the church kind of allowed these contained periods of debauchery, mockery of the church and things like that, and inversions of social norms, and it was meant to invoke a biblical principle that, quote, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. So that's what this piece is about. And then the church obviously succumbed to pressures and condemned it eventually. This piece is called The Husband Stitch. It's titled after one of Carmen's short stories, which is actually how we met. And these works were part of a larger body of work that that I had as part of a solo show in London in White Cube called In Jest. Should move more quickly. And then in December of 2022, I was offered a solo show at the Whitney that opened in July of 2023. So, Kathy, when you were talking about the short timelines they give you for museums, this was like 6 months. And I made a new body of work because it really felt like it was calling for, it's a small space, it felt like it was calling for a very singular move. So I made a series of 6 10-foot paintings, and 2 small-scale paintings, and then 9 works on paper. And then I introduced that space with this wall that had a kind of curve in it, and the wall had this backdrop of one of the reference images I often use, which is a parasitic larva. And then it introduced the drawings that you had to kind of confront before entering the space. So this is the back of that wall and those 2 smaller works. This is a piece from the show called Pico y Placa, and then a detail of that piece. Trying to move a little bit more quickly. This piece is called Pinching the Frenulum. A short time after that, I started working on 2 new bodies of work. One was for a solo show in Paris, and another for a smaller presentation of works at the Jewish Museum as part of a group show. So I'll start with that Paris show. I started thinking about the sort of spectacle and the figure of the hero that emerges from it. And it was kind of an exploration into the sort of mythologized masculinity, the kind of promise of glory, and the idealized hero that emerges from social manipulation. So I was really interested in that kind of like vulnerability of machismo. And what is that sort of childlike struggle against authority that results in these fantasies of heroism? So this piece is called Paper Planes. And this piece is called Spinal Sheds of a Desperate Glory. Thinking about the spine as a symbol of courage, and like themes around protection, real or diluted, were a big part of this show. So just a couple of reference images that made up this painting, called Like a Devil Sick of Sin. These two were smaller works from the show. In Your Vast and Ancient Sorrow That Was My Home was titled after an Eileen Myles poem, and Scattered Signals of the Upright. And then this is the presentation at the Jewish Museum, which was part of a show called Overflow Afterglow on color. So I made about 5 new paintings for that show. It was a really busy year. This piece is called The Old Lie Dulce Es. It's a painting I made after looking at a video of a walrus trying to stand up and constantly falling. So its massiveness as it rose and fell gave this sort of like warrior-like quality. And the piece is titled after the Wilfred Owens poem that talks about the kind of guttural horrors of war. So I was thinking of ideas around nationalism and heroism and glory and what it means to die or kill for land, and to maintain borders, and how that evolves into the tales we tell. And this is a piece called Game, thinking about the trap and the trophy. I was looking at Dutch still lives, and of like dead game, and thinking about what it would be like to use the string they used to kind of hold up that dead game for those paintings as kind of like puppet string and kind of reanimating a dead thing. And I stayed thinking about death and play in the body of work that followed, which is the most recent body of work. So this past September, I started to work on a new body of work that culminated into this show that actually just closed at White Cube, like a week ago. But yeah, so these paintings were kind of following that body of work, but made in a period of time that I think, I mean, it's very recent, so we all remember that, September to April. I was kind of experiencing this moment of what I was terming a frantic paralysis, where urgency and inaction exist in constant friction, and trying to make sense of the sort of compounding emergencies, and also thinking about the body and the algorithm, like chafing, and just this sense of urgency was kind of showing up in the studio. And I'm still trying to make sense of it, so I'm gonna try to talk about this as best as I can. This piece is called Revenge Fantasies, after this book that I read right before I made the painting called Revenge Fantasies of the Politically Dispossessed. So it's dealing with like frustration and impotence and fantasies that emerge from that in place of resistance. So really feeling like there was just no language that I had for how to deal with the moment like that. I have to say that has shifted a lot after being here and the past few presentations. But yeah, I abandoned a lot of spaces of comfort in the making of this work. I stopped working on the preparatory drawings and really made a lot of decisions on canvas, and that really shifted the composition of the work. So a lot of decisions were made improvisationally. So this is just a detail. It's a little hard to see, but I've been thinking a lot about the artifice in painting. So that kind of came, like, thinking about playing dead and playing with dead things. Those two, modes of death and play were kind of going back and forth in my head. And just what it means to kind of traffic in the farce and the acts of transformation and reanimation that come from that. This painting was made in the months leading up to the 2024 election and finished in the months leading up to the inauguration, so it was kind of in that period. And I was really thinking of this kind of dissection of political theater, or like an autopsy of a system that's collapsing in on itself. The title is March of the Cards. It's based on the March of the Cards in Alice in Wonderland. It's a kind of procession of bureaucratic absurdity. So I was thinking about the idea of kind of adhering to nonsensical rules, and thinking about the kind of flatness of the cards, if you remember from the film, and just how the kind of absurd can be transformed through the visceral. So this is some details from that painting, This piece is called Behavioral Compliance Metrics, No One Bears Witness to the Witness. And the title came from thinking of ways that corporate jargon can be used for dehumanizing purposes. So I actually went on ChatGPT and I asked it to give me a presentation as if it was a millennial and I was an investor in a for-profit prison, like just to see what kind of dehumanizing language it could provide me. So that's where behavioral compliance metrics comes from. And no one bears witness to the witness. Excuse me. It's a line from a Paul Celan poem. This piece is called Arena. I was thinking about the kind of problematic middle that forms from states of contradiction. So this is this piece is called Playing Dead. I've been thinking about like how to arrive at abstraction through an abundance of representation, and this I think is the work that most kind of shows that. And in this whole body of work, there's this motif of the frogs that I'm not getting into too much, but as I started thinking about the apologue of the frog in the boiling water, which describes the kind of dangers of gradual and impending threat, and kind of the dangers of ignoring that. And also the frog in the Bible, representing the frog coming out of the beast's mouth is this kind of representation of the deceit or the lie. So this is a detail from that painting, and in the bottom right, there's actually this little frog playing dead that I kind of tucked in there. This piece is called Counterfeit Gift of Tongues, which is a term that comes from these charismatic Christian circles, and it's about, it represents someone that appears to be speaking in tongues, but they're not coming directly from God, so it's sort of the lie. And I used imagery of if anyone's seen the movie Holy Mountain, the kind of introductory scene is these sort of frogs dressed as soldiers that are made to battle each other in this like set in this comically grotesque fashion. They're like throwing red paint on them, and you really couldn't have made that movie after the 1970s. But I just saw them as these kind of tragic actors, and so they made their way into this painting. And then I was also contending with the grid for the first time. That was a kind of challenge I imposed on myself. So the grid kind of became this like cage and the stage for the tragic actors that were these frogs. All these works were made for this show, where I also made the site-specific installation using walls of latex that created a kind of corridor in the gallery. So there was this sort of walls of these latex sheets that were latex painted on latex, and they sort of rerouted the navigation of the space. So you actually had to, So you actually had to like walk through the curtains and touch the curtains to see each painting. So the only painting that you could actually see when you walked in the room was this one. And then, yeah, the title of the show is Glottal Stop, which, if you're unfamiliar, is this sort of muscle, like a muscular spasm of the throat where the vocal cords like close abruptly and they interrupt flow of speech. So I was thinking of just like a presence and an interruption. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and thank you, CD, for that very heartfelt introduction. So at this point, I think we'd like to invite Carmen and Ilana to the stage for our Q&A. And if you'd like to pose a question, raise your hand and just please wait for Miracle to come by with the microphone. We have the program is being live streamed, so we just want to make sure that anybody viewing outside of here will be able to hear your question. So who would like to kick it off?
Thank you. Hi. I am been thinking a lot about, Ilana, what you've said about like starting from failure and kind of, you know, both of you in your work like go into like really like sort of absurdity or like kind of like grotesque or wherever, you know, like kind of outside of like what we might call like the norm, I guess. And so I'm just curious, like when you reach that point of a failure or like what you perceive as a failure, what is your next, like how do you get to that next step to go to the, like past that? Like what is your, if you have like a mantra or like a process that you go to say, okay, like where do I go from here?
Do you have an answer?
I mean, I don't know if it's an answer, but I find that it's a horrible place to stand in front of something, and if you think of yourself and identify yourself as someone that makes something beautiful, and you're standing in front of something that isn't, and you know, the impulse is to just go with what you know, make it look good, but actually like sitting in it and sitting with the thing and letting it push you forward. And there's no mantra that I have except to just like sit in the ick of it, you know. And I'm thinking about that in general, like in moments where you know I can't be anyone else but myself, so I have to like sit in the ick of sometimes just being me, and then I like continue with that, and that's just, yeah, like maybe it just becomes a metaphor in the way I move around in the studio, but yeah, sometimes like sitting in front of a body of work, there's a sense of paralysis, like you can't move when you're trying to move against the things that become shorthands and just like you know, for the purpose of evolution and growth in the work. And just I think there's just like a lot of trust that something will come, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I have this problem where I am an eldest daughter. Eldest daughters. Who here is like an eldest daughter? Do we got eldest daughters in this room? Yes, yeah, you know. I'm like a real perfectionist and have had a lot of, and I'm very stubborn, and I sort of don't want to give up on anything, which can be good and also can be a huge problem, obviously, when like something's really not working and I feel kind of stuck in it, but I don't want to release it, and I want to make it work. And so, you know, I've had this, I put out 3 books in 4 years. I put out a book in 2017, a book in 2019, and a book in 2021. And then COVID happened, and I was just like lost my mind. And like the book that I had sold in 2019, I'm only finishing right now. And so, and I also was also working on some like television stuff in the meantime, but it was really not working. But I like refused to let it go. I was like, I can do this. I know I can do this. Like, I'm a good writer, you know. And then I feel like I was in it for so long that I was like really struggling. And so, yeah, I feel like I have this problem where like I want to sort of move through failure, and like reject it as like a possibility. But of course, sometimes things fall apart and sometimes things fail. And so I feel like I'm constantly like struggling with these 2 pieces of myself, which is the piece of me that wants to like do well and be good and be impressive and all the things that one wants to be, and then knowing when you have to let something go and something's really not working for you. So this is a constant sort of thing for me. So I don't know if I have any like wisdom about it. But yeah.
Hi, that was really such a pleasure to listen to you both. This is a question for you, Ilana. One of the things I love about your work is it seems you have these timeless themes that you reference in your work around humanity and what is good and evil and what's strength and weakness, and that's the kind of things it makes you think of, and it feels timeless. And actually seeing your references is kind of disheartening in the sense that we're still wrestling with these kind of questions from, you know, Baroque references to today. And maybe I'm seeing what I want to see or think I'm seeing in your recent work, but it feels like maybe I'm seeing recent references that sort of put it in time and space a little with tools or technology. And I wonder if that was intentional and what's behind that, and if that's because there's more urgency that you see today, or if you could touch on that.
Yeah, you're just making me, I'm just realizing that what you're saying is locating it in time. Like I kind of hadn't realized that, and that's really exciting. But yeah, those, like trying to think about, there was a couple different, there's a couple different ways I can enter that. I was thinking about how to use mechanisms in like kind of trompe-l'oeil strategies as a way to kind of lean back into the I had this moment of just painting is making paintings right now felt so absurd, and I had this moment of just being like, this is a farce. Like, I'm talking about performance. I'm performing entirely enclosed in my studio. Like, I'm not out in the world. I'm not protesting. I'm not, or at least not enough, or not in the, just nothing felt. So it just, so I was just like, again, sitting in the ick of it and just sitting with the absurdity of what it is to make a painting sometimes. And so I started to just deal with like moments of realism and try to like undermine the painting. And then also thinking about, trying to solve something through like almost like sculptural, like dealing with the actual real space of like in engineering, how do I cinch this? Like, I actually have to put like a ring to cinch these two areas together. Things like that. So I started to think about like the actual objects that I'm dealing with. And then also just dealing with like things like, I was looking at a lot of artists that work with bondage, because there was a lot of themes around bondage in this work. And so naturally I got to like the more utilitarian means of binding, I could answer that for a really long time, but I want to,
First of all, thank you both so much. It's such a blessing to all of us to get to be this close to your work and your process. My question's for Carmen. I want to ask you about confidence when you are doing something that is maybe considered against the standard of the form. I think about in the Dream House, and there are all these chapters, whatever you want to call them, that are like one sentence long. And when I read that book, those really strike me and stand out as just, wow, like a writer to do something like this and to submit it for publication, there has to be such a level of confidence with that. And I really admire that. So I'm curious if that's a performance, if it's really that confident, and how because it's really kind of astounding to me. So what's your thought process whenever you're doing something that really kind of fucks with the form?
I mean, I would say that I have a lot of confidence in what I do, which is like, you're like, how do you become confident? I don't know, I mentioned that I was working on some stuff in Hollywood until very recently, and like one of the things that made it so hard was that unlike when I work all the other times I'm doing my own writing, I felt like I was losing the ability to understand if what I was writing was good, because like I was writing these scripts and I would hand them, they'd be like, nope, do it again, and like I was just feeling really, and I got to the point where I was like, am I even a good writer? Like, is everyone been just lying to me this entire time? And just, because like it just felt like I had lost these instincts. But normally I'm actually I feel like I just have like a lot of self-possession, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's just that like audacity of like eldest daughter stuff, the truth teller of the family, who's just like, well, I'm just gonna fucking do it my own way. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just that I've always been really lucky, and that I've had people around me who have like really supported me and like seen what I do. I mean, I always have had this sort of belief or this idea that like at every stage of my career, I've been like, if just one person would like believe in me and help me get to the next step, I think I could really do this. And so, I had a teacher in college who was like, you're really talented, like you should apply to MFA programs, like you could be a really great writer, or like, it could be the next step for you. And then when I was in grad school, like nobody was really paying attention to what I was doing, but I had some teachers who were like, your stuff is so weird, it's awesome, like read this, and this, and like think about these things. And, I found most agents were like, you're only writing short stories, this is not useful to us, tell us when you have a novel. But then one agent was like, a young queer agent was like, he was like, okay, I'm really interested in this whole project, and like I'm gonna represent you even though you're writing short stories only. And he's been my agent for over a decade now. And I was rejected from like 40 publishers for Her Body and Other Parties, but one publisher, Grey Wolf, wanted to buy it. And so I feel like this has kind of been always my Like I always sort of joke like that I'm underestimated at one's own peril because I really do just like sort of perhaps lightly delusionally just like want to sort of move forward and do things, and I'm very stubborn and I just sort of like do it. And so, yeah, and I feel like at this point in my career, like when I started, you know, I didn't really know if what I was doing, like it was hard for me to say, like, was it good, was it bad? But I've been working long enough and I know myself well enough to know when I'm firing on all cylinders and to know when something feels correct. And it's instinctual mostly. Like, I don't know if you have this experience as well, where like when you feel like you're on something, it feels like you know it to be true, even if you couldn't really explain that it's working. I don't know if you have the same experience.
I do not have the same.
Oh, interesting.
Not, not at all. I remember talking to you about this once, and I was like, I feel like I have to sit in that doubt for so long, and it's you know, when no one's seeing the work, and while it's brewing, you know, it's you don't get to like workshop it really.
Right.
So you're just kind of like, this could be absolutely horrible. And actually, in the making of this last show, I had this moment where I actually was like, it's very possible that this show just won't even happen because politically, I just don't know where this country will be at. So whatever work I'm making, if this is the last show I have or this is the last work I put out, then you know, it takes me a really long time to make a painting. So I was like, I'm just gonna go with it. I mean, having my partner's also an artist, and it helped to have him come in the studio and be like, no, keep going, because you do need someone sometimes to say that when you're, it's just like you're circling in this like drain of doubt, but you just have to you know, there's like you said it right, the audacity. Sometimes you're just, and also for me, sometimes the naivete. I'm like, I'm just gonna hope for the best, close my eyes and hope for the best, but be okay with that, with a bad review if it's gonna come, because yeah.
I mean, I think also there's something about like, it's like I do have doubts and I do fail at things and I do things don't turn out the way I expect them, and that's just the reality of having a creative practice, is that nothing's gonna go your way. And like right now, I read to you from this like pieces from this novel. Like I've never written a novel before, like successfully. I mean, I've tried many times, and I have many times, but it's just never taken. And I feel like this is the first time that I feel like I have a novel-sized idea that I think I can try, but I'm like really kind of learning how to sort of sustain narrative over the course of what I'm hoping are like hundreds of pages, which is like just really different than my normal fiction sort of style, which is like, you know, more, I feel like a natural short story writer. So I feel like this is like, I'm a sprinter who's learning how to run a marathon. And that's like scary, but I also am like, so part of me is like, oh, am I gonna be able to do it? Like, will I be able to write a novel? And then part of me is like, yeah, why not? Sure.
It's like being okay with like failing publicly or something, like because you have to.
I mean, the reality is that like I've had 3 books come out. One of them didn't really get reviewed because it came out during COVID and was from DC Comics, so no one's ever heard of that book. But the other two were like very well received, very well reviewed. They did really well, and I have nowhere to go but down. Like, you know, the chances of like getting a really like having, and I think that like, but I find it really interesting when people fail in interesting ways. So like, I'm not gonna say whose book it is, but there was a book by a fairly well-known writer that came out maybe like 7 years ago that was so weird and such a departure from her normal style. And I didn't think the book was very good, but I thought it was super interesting because I was like, she really tried something. I don't know if it's the best execution of this concept, but like she really just went for it. And I think that that's what you kind of have to do, is like be like, right, open to the idea that I might fuck up, I might fail, somebody might hate this, but also it might be transcendent. And like that's sort of that like tightrope that you're walking when you're doing work. Interesting failures.
So this is hyper specific to In the Dream House. This question's for you. So that book completely changed the way I viewed creative nonfiction and its possibilities, specific to the structure. So I really want to know how you approached that structure, how you arrived at the final structure, how you started versus what the book became.
Yeah. So while I was working on my first book, Her Body and Other Parties, which is short stories, I was also sort of writing this material that it was sort of what would become the memoir, but I wasn't quite sure what it was yet. And I don't have any training in like nonfiction writing. Like I studied fiction. Fiction is sort of my primary mode. And so And so I was like, well, whatever, I'm just gonna like kind of poke away at this. And I was writing this like fairly straightforward memoir where it was just like this happened and this happened and this happened. And I was reading what I'd written and I was like, this is terrible. This is like unreadable. It's so serious. It's so just, there's no levity to it. There's no light. There's no effervescence. There's nothing. It's just like me being so sad for so long. And I was like, I would not make anybody read this. I don't want to read it, you know, even though I lived it. So it was a really weird moment. And I was like, I'm interested in this project theoretically, but I don't really know what it's supposed to look like. And then I was teaching, so I had graduated, but I had come back in Iowa. There's this really wonderful summer writing camp for high schoolers, which like I didn't go to as a student, but I would have murdered to have gone to as a student. Basically there's like a bunch of high schoolers. It's like 2 weeks of workshops, and it's really special and really sweet. But I had never taught. It's like the first time I ever taught sort of the style of teaching here at Falk, where it's like a week of just like every day you have class, and I had never really done that before. And so I was sort of learning how do I fit all my thoughts about things like genre and language into these like chunks of time. And so I was going through every day. I was like, today's horror day, today's fantasy day, today's science fiction day, today's like metafiction. And as I was doing that and talking about that work with the students, I found myself thinking about my project, which actually happens to me all the time. It is one of the reasons I love teaching. It's because I'm forced to externalize and say things that I already sort of know inside, and it can really like almost like defamiliarize these thoughts and like make them feel new again. And so I literally was like, what if I did like, it was like, here's the story as horror, like a gothic, like a haunted house. And then I was like, well, why not like a epic fantasy? Why not this? And so I started just like writing down ideas for chapters, way more than I ever used. But a lot of them were in the final book. Like Deja Vu was one that I came up with really early. I was like, oh, I'll repeat a chapter and I'll vary it very slightly every time, but it'll repeat itself. And so I just sort of did that. So I pitched the book to Grey Wolf. I sold it to them as just this sort of skeletal, like 40-page thing, which like you would recognize it, but it's like really different from the final book. Because I was like, I want to do all this research, but I've done none of the research. And they were like, we got you. Don't worry about it. We believe that you will do that. And so I kind of wrote it in these weird chunks. I wrote like all the memoir material, and then I did like a ton of this like sort of archival historical research, and then I was like writing these chapters that were sort of more like for that. And then actually some of the most like I think the chapters that people know the best are actually some of the last that I wrote. So like, the Choose Your Own Adventure was like one of the last things that I wrote. The sort of intro where I talk about the silence of the archive and I talk about Sadia Hartman's work is one of the last things I wrote. So I wrote it in this very like weird sort of backwards way. But yeah, I think it was just like, because once I started thinking about these chunks, and which permitted this air and this effervescence and this levity, I was like, oh, this is actually the way like into this story. And when I was thinking, it just felt right. Like I like knew, like I was like, this is the way this is gonna work. And suddenly it felt like the whole thing like clicked and like opened up for me. So yeah, and then the rest is history. So.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Hello.
Hi.
So that was fantastic. This question is for both of you. I wondered if you could both, I think you had made a mention about like comedy and horror, but I think you both work with comedy and horror, so I wondered if you could both talk a little bit about that.
So many. I think I'm really excited by the thing that is it gets really close to being something else, but never quite tips over. And I feel like comedy and horror is that there's like just in terms of how it's visually represented on the body, just the act of having to like a cartoon will do just horrific things to the body that you're supposed to suspend empathy in order to enjoy, whereas horror you're kind of supposed to lean into empathy to actually like relate to the body. So I like to look at that as a space of the kind of what teeters on the edge of one before becoming the other. And so I'll look a lot in terms of painting to to the very kind of visceral approach to painting, kind of really like getting materially heavy, and then I'll look to the very light sort of line work of the caricature and the cartoon, and have them both coexist in this way that's sort of very confusing, kind of sit in that space of tension. And I also actually look to writers like Carmen for that, you know. So it's fun to be asked that question sitting here with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think it was today in class that we were talking about sweet and salty and how like different flavors enhance other flavors, right? And so I generally think that humor and horror go really beautifully together because they just sort of create like the opposite side of a seesaw, and they just push each other higher and higher. And a movie that was really influential to me that I saw when I was in college that I was really obsessed with was The Host, like the it's like a monster. It's a Korean monster film, and there's this scene. It's a movie that's both like very scary and very funny. And there's a scene really early on where there's been this like huge tragedy, and so there's like photos of the dead like kind of hanging up in this space. Like it's not it's like a memorial of some kind, and the family who has lost somebody, they all show up, like the family at the center of this film, and they're like weeping and screaming, and it's so terrible. And then it goes on for so long that it becomes really, really funny. And they're like grabbing each other and like howling and like falling to the ground and like pull each other up on the other people's bodies, and it just goes on and on and on and on, and it just like never stops. It's really funny. And I found that sort of gesture of like letting something really upsetting go on for like a little too long, and sort of turning the corner into humor, like really smart. And yeah, I just feel like it just creates like a heightened effect. So like when I wrote my first book, I had this story, Especially Heinous, which is this like really weird novella. It's like Law and Order SVU fan fiction by David Lynch or something. And it takes the characters of Benson and Stabler and like rewrites the show, the first 12 seasons of the show. And it's a story about like sexual violence. It's a story about against children, against women, against like there's just, you know, and like what it means to like binge a show that's literally just like one horror after another. But it's funny too, because I was like, it's absurd. Like there's like an absurdity is the word you use to like sort of all of this. And I think the only way to make a story like that sort of move forward and have that kind of weight is, again, it's like this idea of like effervescence or levity. Like it's cut with something else. It's not too serious. And I think sometimes writing is very self-serious, and I try not to like, I don't want to do that in my work. So I'm really always thinking about sort of humor and darkness as sort of just two sides of the same coin.
All right, let's give another round of applause for Carmen Maria Machado and Ilana Savdie. And remember, Carmen's books are available for sale right back there at our bookstore. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow.